International index funds are a great way to diversify your equities holding. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the 5 best international index funds to buy and hold in your investment portfolio. Hi, if you're new to the channel, my name is Tay from Financial Tortoise, where we learn to grow our wealth slow and steady. We're all pretty familiar with major American companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. However, how many of us can honestly say we know much about international companies like Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, also known as TSMC, Tencent Holdings, or Samsung Electronics? But would you be surprised to know that some of these companies rival the size of many major US-based corporations in market cap? TSMC is a Taiwanese multinational semiconductor manufacturing and design company and is considered the world's most valuable semiconductor company. Tencent is a Chinese multinational technology and entertainment company and is considered the largest company in the world in the video and gaming industry. Samsung is a major South Korean multinational electronics corporation that manufactures electronic components such as lithium-ion batteries, semiconductors, image sensors, camera modules, and displays for clients such as Apple, Sony, and HTC. And when we're only investing in US-based companies by holding only US-based stocks, we're potentially missing out on the portfolio growth that these international companies can provide. US stocks provide great return on our investments, but US stocks still represent only about half the world's stocks. The total stock market value of the world is approximately $68 trillion, and US companies represent about $33 trillion of that, or about 49%. And the history of the Japanese stock market serves as a good example for why we will want to consider having a portion of our portfolio in international stocks. At the end of 1989, the Japanese stock market's capitalized value was considered the largest in the world. The Nikkei 225 index, the index of 225 largest publicly traded companies in Japan, reached an all-time high of close to 40,000 yen. Sadly, 22 years later, Nikkei was under 8,500 and to this day has yet to reach its all-time high again. But sadder is a Japanese investor who failed to invest in international stocks outside of Japan. The US-based companies are currently the world leaders in market capitalization and revenue, but who can confidently say that it will stay like that in the future? It would be unfortunate, but the same thing could happen to the US stock investors. I personally still have strong confidence in the US economy and US-based companies as a whole, but I also have to continuously check my assumptions. Financial writer Larry Swedroe had a saying, "Never treat the highly likely as certain and the highly unlikely as impossible." Alright, with that said, if you agree with me that it would be a good idea to hold some international stocks in our portfolio, let's jump into my 5 personal favorite international index funds to buy and hold forever. The first index fund on our list is Vanguard Total International Stock Index Fund, also known as VTIAX. The fund tracks the FTSE Global All Cap excluding the United States index. The index comprises large, mid-cap, and small-cap stocks globally excluding the United States. The index is derived from the FTSE Global Equity Index series, which covers 98% of the world's investable market capitalization. And this one fund represents approximately 7,800 international companies. It has an expense ratio of 0.11%, which means if you have $10,000 invested in VTIAX, you're essentially paying $11 for Vanguard to manage this fund for you. In addition, it has a minimum investment requirement of $3,000. The fund started in 2010, and since then, its average annual total returns has been 4.79%. Now, let's take a look at its composition. The top 3 regions represented by this fund are Europe at 29.6%, the Pacific region at 26.7%, and the emerging markets at 25.2%. The biggest countries being Japan at 14.8%, United Kingdom at 10.4%, China at 8.1%, Canada at 7.9%, and France at 6.2%. The top 5 companies represented are Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, Nestle, Tencent Holdings, Samsung Electronics, and Roche Holdings. This fund aims to represent the market outside the United States based on market cap, so it's not a surprise that a good percentage of funds is made up of developed countries like Japan, Western Europe, and Canada. However, what is also nice about this fund is that the quarter of the fund is made up of emerging markets like China, India, and Brazil. Emerging markets can be a bit risky, but at times are known to provide much greater returns than developed regions. So if you're looking to hold one international fund in your portfolio that reflects a broad representation of companies outside the United States, then Vanguard Total International Stock Index Fund is a solid option. The second on our list is Vanguard Developed Market Index Fund, VTMGX. Unlike the Vanguard Total International Stock Index Fund, which aims to include all the markets in the world, VTMGX is focused exclusively on developed markets, as its name implies. And one of the key reasons you might want to hold VTMGX versus a VTIAX has to do with accounting risk. Accounting is not a sexy topic, but it is crucial in the world of commerce. The financial report of a company acts as its report card, and investors around the world use them to decide if they're going to or not going to invest in a specific company. Thus, the importance of accounting standards. And most often, developed countries have the highest accounting standards and practices, especially compared to many emerging countries. When companies in developed countries like the United Kingdom and Japan produce their quarterly and annual financial reports, they need to adhere to strict accounting policies. I've worked with many accountants in my former life, and trust me, they may not be the funnest bunch, but they take their accounting policies seriously. Many emerging countries do not have the same level of transparent and strict accounting standards as required in many developed nations. So what this means is that when we review financial reports from some of the developing countries, it's questionable if it's truly reflecting what's happening on the ground. They may not have been vetted by top-notch accounting firms that is common amongst developed nations. Therefore, if you want to focus your investments to include only countries and companies that uphold the highest accounting standards, VTMGX might be a good option. The fund tracks the FTSE Developed All-Cap Excluding the United States Index. It represents approximately 4,100 international companies from developed nations. It has an expense ratio of 0.7%, which means if you have $10,000 invested in VTMGX, you're essentially paying $7 for Vanguard to manage this fund for you. In addition, it has a minimum investment requirement of $3,000. The fund started in 1999, and since then, its average annual total return has been 4.28%. Now let's take a look at its composition. The top 3 regions represented by this fund are Europe at 52.5%, Pacific at 36.1%, and North America at 10.6%. The biggest countries being Japan at 19.9%, United Kingdom at 13.6%, Canada at 10.6%, France at 8.2%, and Switzerland at 7.8%. The top 5 companies represented are Nestle, Samsung Electronics, Roche Holdings, Shell, and ASML Holding. If you want international exposure that is only focused on developed countries with the highest accounting standards, VTMGX is a great option to hold. The third on our list is Vanguard Emerging Markets Stock Index Fund, VEMAX. And this fund is essentially the opposite of the Vanguard Developed Market Index Fund, VTMGX. It is focused exclusively on developing or emerging markets, countries like China, India, and Brazil. Though there are most often higher risks involved with investing in these countries, as I mentioned earlier, at times they can have higher returns. Just look at China. China sustained a miracle economic growth over the past 4 decades at an average rate 4 times that of the US during the same time period. The growth has slowed down recently, but the fact is that if you diversify some of your money into the Chinese market during its growth period, it would have been a nice addition to your portfolio. It's impossible to say which one of the emerging countries will show a similar growth rate in the upcoming years, but nonetheless, if you want greater exposure to emerging markets, VEMAX is a great fund to hold. The fund tracks the FTSE Emerging Markets All-Cap China A Inclusion Index. It represents approximately 5,400 international companies from emerging nations. It has an expense ratio of 0.14%, which means that if you have $10,000 invested in VEMAX, you're essentially paying $14 for Vanguard to manage this fund for you. In addition, it has a minimum investment requirement of $3,000. The fund started in 2006, and since then, its average annual total return has been 5.03%. Now, let's take a look at its composition. As the name implies, the fund is made up of 99.6% emerging markets. The biggest countries being China at 32.9%, Taiwan at 19%, India at 15.7%, Brazil at 6.8%, and Saudi Arabia at 4.9%. The top 5 companies represented are Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, Tencent Holdings, Alibaba Group Holding, Reliance Industries, and Meituan Dianping. I personally wouldn't make this a core holding in my portfolio, but if you like the idea of having exposure to exciting markets of emerging countries, this fund is a great option. Alright, with the next 2 funds, we're actually going to move away from Vanguard funds to other investment firms, Fidelity and Charles Schwab. Though Vanguard is my personal investment firm of choice, sometimes we may not have the option to choose our investment firm because of our employer. Thus, let's take a look at a great Fidelity International Fund option. The Fidelity Total International Index Fund, FTIHX. The fund tracks the MSCI ACWI All Country World Index excluding US Investable Market Index. It represents approximately 5,000 international companies. It has an expense ratio of 0.6%, which means if you have $10,000 invested in this fund, you're essentially paying $6 for Fidelity to manage this fund for you. Unlike the Vanguard funds that we talked about so far, Fidelity Total International Index Fund has a $0 minimum investment requirement. The fund started in 2016, and since then its average annual total return has been 6.17%. Now let's take a look at its composition. The top 3 regions represented by this fund are Europe at 40.37%, emerging markets at 28.4%, and Japan at 14.16%. The biggest countries are Japan at 14.16%, United Kingdom at 9.92%, Canada at 8.18%, China at 7.65%, and France at 6.35%. The top 5 companies represented are Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, Nestle, ASML Holding, Roche Holding, and Samsung Electronics. In essence, the Fidelity Total International Index Fund, the FTIHX, is very similar to Vanguard's Total International Stock Index Fund, VTIAX. It holds a good balance of developed and emerging markets, and the bonus is that it's actually slightly cheaper with 0.6% expense ratio versus a 0.11%. Granted, we're talking about a $5 difference in a $10,000 portfolio, but hey, every penny counts. The fifth on our list is Schwab International Index Fund, SWISX. The Schwab International Index Fund is very similar to Vanguard's Developed Market Index Fund, VTMGX, focused specifically on developed markets like Japan, United Kingdom, and France. Charles Schwab unfortunately doesn't have a good low-cost international index funds that tracks both developed and emerging markets. The funds that somewhat do are actually actively managed funds with high expense ratios, and I personally wouldn't recommend them. The Schwab International Index Fund tracks the MSCI EAFE Index, an equity index which captures large and mid-cap representation across 21 developed market countries around the world, excluding the US and Canada. It represents approximately 800 international companies from developed nations. It has an expense ratio of 0.06%, which means if you have $10,000 invested in SWISX, you're essentially paying $6 for Charles Schwab's managed fund for you. Unlike the Vanguard fund we talked about so far, Schwab International Index Fund has a $0 minimum investment requirement. The fund started in 1997, and since then, its average annual total return has been 5.04%. Now, let's take a look at its composition. The biggest countries being Japan at 22.32%, United Kingdom at 15.27%, France at 11.39%, Switzerland at 10.41%, and Germany at 8.24%. The top 5 companies represented are Nestle, ASML Holding, Roche Holding, Shell, and AstraZeneca. If you're invested with Charles Schwab and are looking for a good international index fund to broaden your exposure, Schwab International Index Fund is a great option. Diversifying our exposure to international stocks can mitigate our overall risk, and they do have the potential to provide us with greater return on our investments. Just remember that any chance for higher rewards comes with higher risk. That's it, guys. If you'd like to learn more about international funds and the different perspectives on it, check out my video here. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, all the best.